The woman almost collapsed due to low blood sugar. A kind security guard rushed to get her a sugary drink, but the next second, the pregnant woman pulled out a phone laced with poison. By the time she received her drink, the Russian ambassador to South Korea suddenly dropped dead. However, just as the pregnant woman was about to make her escape, a security officer burst into the elevator. "There's a pregnant woman going down. Stop her." The two immediately engaged in a fierce fight inside the cramped elevator. The guard couldn't draw his gun, so he pulled a knife from his shoe and stabbed her in the stomach, but the blade struck nothing. The woman had only been pretending to be pregnant. She quickly grabbed the knife, counterattacked, and killed the guard. However, because of his interference, the elevator returned to the ballroom. Rebecca picked up the gun, fired back while dodging bullets, and urgently called for her extraction team. On the other end, her teammate Atwood monitored everything through surveillance and directed her toward the staff stairwell in the corner. Rebecca deliberately shot out the glass to draw attention, then swiftly escaped through the path Atwood had pointed out. The woman's name was Rebecca, a deadly operative working for CADIS, a private American intelligence agency. This time, she was sent to Seoul, South Korea, to assassinate Russian ambassador Mikhail Karpov. However, Rebecca had no idea that she, too, was being hunted. Meanwhile, as Atwood was prepping the getaway vehicle, he heard persistent knocking at the door. "You've got the wrong room," he called out, but the Korean man refused to leave. The moment Atwood stood up, the door burst open. The man stormed in, grabbed his laptop and set it aside, then attacked. Within seconds, Atwood was knocked unconscious. The man checked the extraction point, sent a fake retreat signal to Rebecca and her team, then grabbed his gear and headed straight for the target. Along the escape route, he set up a trap using a fake baby stroller to block the road. Unaware, Rebecca's team fell right into it. The man then drove to the extraction point to pick up Rebecca, but the earlier crash had scratched the car's headlight. Spotting the detail, Rebecca realized something was off, turned, and opened fire. The gunfire drew the attention of Korean police, forcing the man to abandon the mission and flee. In truth, the man had no intention of harming Rebecca. He was David, her father, presumed dead 9 years ago. Everything he did was to free his daughter from CADIS, but his plan failed. Elsewhere, CADIS leader Juno was informed by his son Oliver that the Seoul mission had gone wrong. Mikhail Karpov was dead, but the extraction was ambushed and 3 agents were attacked. Luckily, local police hadn't linked the incident to CADIS. It turned out CADIS operated as a private intelligence firm, but Juno, an American, had been selling Allied military intel to the Russian intelligence service. The assassination was meant to cover his tracks before the CIA discovered him, yet everything still went wrong. Juno's expression darkened. He ordered his son to send a team to find Rebecca immediately. However, Oliver couldn't hide his jealousy. His mother had always valued Rebecca more than her own son. She shot down a Venezuelan military jet, and everyone still believes it was a mechanical failure. If I care about Rebecca, it's because she's the most valuable asset in this organization. Juno then asked, "Have we identified who's behind this?" Oliver shook his head, saying there were still no solid leads. All they knew was that the attacker worked alone and seemed to know their every move. Juno's eyes turned cold. He ordered his son to kill the man, no matter the cost. Meanwhile, David skillfully wiped every trace of his presence from the car before abandoning it in a parking lot. He had promised his current wife that if he couldn't bring his daughter back, he would leave that life behind for good. After years of faking his death and rebuilding a new life, David still couldn't rest easy. He called his wife, Eun-ju. "We agreed, just one risk. I know, but she needs me." Eun-ju warned, "If CADIS finds out you're alive, they'll kill you, and all of us." David assured her that wouldn't happen. He told her to pack up, move to the safe house, and take the morning train out of town. "Leave nothing traceable," he said before hanging up. Meanwhile, Rebecca, having escaped, called Juno demanding answers, but Juno turned the accusation on her, suggesting that she, the mission lead, had leaked information that led to the ambush. His words cut deep. Since losing her father, Juno had been the only person she trusted like family, and now, he doubted her. Fighting back tears, Rebecca insisted she would never betray the organization. Realizing he had gone too far, Juno softened his tone and told Rebecca to find out who was behind the chaos herself. At the same time, David returned to the car, wrote down specific coordinates on a card, then smashed the window, setting off the blaring alarm. He then took a cab to Incheon, where he met his old friend Choi, the man who had once helped him erase his tracks and build a new identity. Seeing David's anxious look, Choi asked, "What's going on?" David explained his plan and asked for Choi's help one last time. "All these years, I thought she was safe. Now I know she's working for Juno." that's a death sentence, I can't stay still anymore." Seeing David's determination, Choi reluctantly agreed but warned it would take at least 2 days to prepare the new documents. Meanwhile, Rebecca found the note with coordinates that David had intentionally left behind. She told Atwood to track it immediately. At the same time, David armed himself, ready for confrontation. Soon after, Rebecca and her team arrived, unaware that David had already set a trap. Rebecca's attention was caught by a familiar pastry on the table. As confusion crossed her face, a massive explosion erupted, killing 2 of her team members instantly, leaving only her and Atwood alive. As they moved upstairs, they spotted the mastermind's silhouette fleeing through the window. The 2 split up to give chase. Atwood confronted David first, but he was no match for him. Within moments, David knocked him out with the butt of his gun. David then continued his plan, luring his pursuers deeper in until he finally came face to face with his daughter. As Rebecca stepped inside, she noticed a photo of herself with her father, and the next second, that very man stood alive before her eyes. Shocked and speechless, Rebecca demanded, "If you weren't dead, why did you never come for me all these years?" Seeing his daughter's guarded stance, David quickly put his gun down, telling her he knew she deserved an explanation, but now wasn't the time. They had to leave. Rebecca, too shaken to listen, refused to move. David tried to explain that everything he'd done was to protect her, and that he wanted her to come with him. Believing she had calmed down, David stepped closer, only to be struck unconscious by his daughter. Rebecca then called Juno, demanding to know if she had been sent to kill David on purpose. The question stunned Juno. She had no idea David was still alive. If she had, she would have had him eliminated long ago. Now that she knew the truth, she immediately sent a secret message to someone. Seeing David stir awake, Rebecca hung up. David, however, showed no anger. After all, 9 years of silence was hard to justify.
No!
David muttered softly, but Rebecca saw Atwood holding his phone, having just received orders from Juno. Her heart sank. What was that woman planning? The next day, father and daughter stopped by a convenience store to grab supplies. Rebecca took the chance to ask where he was planning to take her. David explained that they would go to Busan to get new passports, then leave the country, for good. Rebecca didn't immediately agree. Pretending to need the restroom, she slipped away to secretly call Juno again, demanding to know why she wanted David dead. Juno replied coldly that David was too dangerous. "Can you take me back?" Rebecca asked. "Of course, there's always a place for you here." "That's nice to hear," Rebecca said quietly, "even if it's not true." Realizing his daughter had been gone too long, David rushed to the restroom and saw the window open. He raced outside to give chase, only to find Rebecca hadn't left at all. She had only wanted to see him panic. The 2 resumed their journey to Busan, but soon ran into a police checkpoint. Juno had been tracking their location and sent corrupt officers to intercept them. Before the officers could even ask for their IDs, David and Rebecca moved, drawing their guns and subduing them in seconds. Thanks to David's quick intervention, Rebecca only shot the young officer in the arm instead of killing him outright. They immediately fled the scene, hijacked another car, and sped off against traffic to escape. Shortly after, Juno received news that the mission had failed again. Her face darkened. Oliver asked curiously, "David co-founded Caddis with you, why is he now the target?" But Juno didn't answer. Later, Oliver traced David's current address, only to find the property registered under a woman named Eun-ju, the daughter of a wealthy businessman and owner of a transport company in Seoul. 7 years earlier, Eun-ju had married a man named Young Dae-ho, a name Juno immediately recognized as David's fake identity. To eliminate the threat, Juno hired a professional Korean hitman known as Gun, paying him a hefty sum to track down and kill David. Meanwhile, David wasn't naive. The fact that they were tracked so quickly meant there was a leak. He took Rebecca to a safe house run by a friend and tricked her into drinking rice wine laced with a sedative. Once Rebecca fell asleep, David searched her and found the phone she'd been using to contact Juno. Around the same time, Juno arrived at the Seoul branch just as Senator Dawson showed up, hoping to meet Karpov, who had already been assassinated. He had contacted the Russian security agency to sell critical U.S. intelligence. "I need to know who was behind it." Dawson had no idea the mastermind stood right before him. Juno calmly lied, promising to report any valuable intel immediately, leaving Dawson unsuspecting. That night, Rebecca woke up and realized her contact with Juno had been exposed. She admitted she'd called Juno twice. David asked what she had said. Rebecca replied she just wanted to talk. After all, he'd appeared out of nowhere, destroyed her ties with the organization, and dragged her into danger. "Why, Dad? For what?" David answered immediately, everything he'd done was because he loved her, to keep her safe. But Rebecca didn't believe him. You call making me an orphan protection, she said bitterly. David explained that 9 years ago, he and his team had been contracted to hunt down a terrorist named Hugo Maldonado and his network, but they discovered that his and Rebecca's personal data had been stolen. That group was merciless and never spared its targets. Before David could reach home to protect his daughter, his team was ambushed, everyone died except him. His voice cracked as he confessed that, knowing the terrorists would never stop, he had no choice but to fake his death so Rebecca could grow up safely. But that choice tormented him for 9 long years. He missed his daughter every single day, never truly moving on, and that's why he risked everything to see her again. Just then, Eun-ju called, terrified. She was being followed by 2 men. David told her to hide. He was on his way. Who was that woman? My wife. David didn't want her involved, but Rebecca insisted on going with him to the train station. By then, Juno's men were already waiting at the station. David took out several of them and lured the rest toward a different exit to give Eun-ju time to board. Father and daughter fought side by side, quickly dispatching the remaining enemies, but as David descended the stairs, he came face to face with Gun, who slashed his abdomen and sent him tumbling down. At that critical moment, Rebecca arrived just in time to save her father. The 3 finally boarded the train and reunited with Eun-ju, but Rebecca's heart shattered when she discovered David had another daughter, a little girl. Anger and jealousy surged inside her as she realized the father who abandoned her had built a new life, a new family. Meanwhile, David called Choi, telling him he urgently needed the fake passports and asking him to deliver the items since he couldn't pick them up himself. Choi agreed, jotting down the time and place before sticking the note to his computer. When Rebecca learned the little girl was already 7, her anger deepened. Her father had said he missed her every day, yet just 2 years after dying, he'd remarried and had another child. So when she faced Eun-ju, Rebecca's hostility was obvious. Eun-ju tried to ease the tension, but Rebecca stayed cold and sharp. You replaced me and my dead mother with a Korean copy. I didn't replace anyone, I did everything I could to find you. Rebecca refused to listen. She told David to focus on escaping, knowing Juno's nature, she would surely send people to intercept them at the next station. And she was right, Juno had dispatched a full team, including the hitman Gun, to the next station. But David was ready. He pulled the emergency brake, got everyone off the train early, and escaped before Juno's men could catch up. Studying the map, Juno deduced they were heading for a nearby truck depot and ordered Gun to pursue them. At that moment, David managed to flag down a truck heading to Busan and begged the driver to give them a ride. Not long after, Gun's team caught up. They spotted bloody handprints on the truck and ordered it stopped, only to find it empty. It had been a clever decoy. Thanks to the ruse, David's group safely reached a safe house in Busan. Meanwhile, Senator Dawson visited Juno with a file containing photos of Oliver and one of his classmates. He explained that the young man was a CIA operative, trained in the U.S., whose family owned property in Gangnam, but he'd been murdered in America not long ago. I know your son was close to a CIA agent. What exactly are you hiding, Juno? It was clear Dawson suspected Oliver's involvement in the agent's death, and that the CIA had already begun monitoring him. Juno feigned panic and asked what she should do. Dawson suggested he speak directly with Oliver. Once Dawson left, Juno confronted her son, and the truth came out. Oliver had indeed killed the young man. That single mistake could expose their entire operation to the CIA. But Oliver grew defensive, arguing that Karpov had been the one selling intel to the Russians, not him. Even if Katis fell apart, it wasn't his fault. He then offered to handle the situation himself, refusing to live forever under his mother's shadow. At the same time, Gun tracked down Choi's shop. The two fought fiercely, but Choi, long retired and still injured, was no match for the elite assassin. Despite the beating, Choi refused to betray David's location. Unfortunately, a note stuck to his computer gave Gun the lead he needed. Gun immediately called Juno, reporting that David was in Busan and was planning to meet his contact that night to collect his passports and flee the country. After a moment's thought, Juno decided this would be a good test for her son. She sent Oliver with a separate team to assist Gun, and ordered the hitman to protect him at all costs. Meanwhile, after a tense day together, Rebecca finally snapped. She accused David of being selfish, abandoning her for protection, only to turn around, have another child, and give that little girl all the love she never had. David wanted to explain, but there was no time left. They had to get the passports and leave South Korea as soon as possible, so he simply muttered "I'm sorry" and hurried to the meeting point. Meanwhile, after much thought, Juno went to see Dawson. She laid Rebecca's file on the table, claiming she was the one who assassinated Karpov, and handed over all the evidence. A former Cadis operative who went rogue, her father reappeared and helped her escape. Juno added that neither she nor her son knew anything about the murdered CIA agent. Dawson didn't press further, he seemed to believe her. Elsewhere, David arrived at the meeting point but couldn't reach Choi. A bad feeling crept in. Just as he was about to leave, he spotted Juno's men blending into the crowd. Surrounded from both directions, David slipped into a narrow alley, unaware that Gunn was watching from above. The assassin didn't move, preferring to let David lead him home for an easier kill. Back home, David didn't even get to cut his little girl's birthday cake before they had to pack up and rush for the pier. Gunn soon realized the house was empty and led his men to the harbor. David planned to take his family to Gioye Island, but the enemy had already closed in. With no other choice, David told Eun-ju to hide with their daughter while he and Rebecca stayed behind to hold the attackers off. Rebecca struck first, buying her father time to rig a crude bomb using fuel drums. Once the timing was right, the two retreated. As the pursuers closed in, the fuel barrels exploded, sending them flying into the air. Yet some enemies survived. Gunn split the team. He'd take David himself, while Oliver would deal with Rebecca. David and Gunn clashed fiercely, neither gaining the upper hand, until Gunn managed to loop a rope around David's leg and drop the ship's anchor, trapping him. Meanwhile, Rebecca's fight went much better. Oliver, all talk and no skill, panicked as she toyed with him, firing wildly until his gun ran dry, forcing him to flee. Rebecca chased him down, cornering him, just as David appeared, cutting off his escape and knocking him to the ground. Furious, David aimed his gun at Oliver's head. Terrified, Oliver blurted out the truth. 9 years ago, the incident in the Philippines, it was my mother's fault. He confessed that Juno had betrayed David to Maldonado, giving the terrorists his personal and family files, all to eliminate him and seize control of the organization. Moments later, Juno received a call from her son's phone, but the voice on the other end was David's. "You took my daughter and my life," David said coldly. Now, it was his turn to settle the score. The next day, Juno's team arrived to collect the bodies. Miraculously, Gunn was still alive. Enraged, Juno ordered a full-scale hunt for David, focusing on his in-laws, but her subordinates reported that the elderly couple was under someone's protection and couldn't be touched. Meanwhile, David and his family were having dinner with his in-laws. Though his father-in-law clearly disapproved of him, he tolerated David for his daughter's sake. After a long pause, David finally asked his father-in-law for help. He needed an unofficial visa and a safe route into Japan, including passage for the entire family. They had to board a cargo ship to Fukuoka within 2 days. That was the only way to keep everyone safe. At first, the old man was furious, but for his daughter's sake, he reluctantly agreed to make the arrangements. Meanwhile, worried for her son, Juno reached out with an offer. If David spared Oliver, she would leave him and his family alone. Cut to Senator Dawson. He never truly believed Juno. It was obvious Rebecca was just a pawn, a scapegoat she'd thrown to the wolves. "Juno was once my student," he said. "I taught her everything she knows about espionage, and now, I fear she's using those skills against her own country." As for David, after listening to Juno's voicemail, an idea struck him. He went to where Oliver was being held, planning to turn mother and son against each other. David told Oliver he had tried to bargain, offering the boy's life in exchange for his family's safety, but Juno had refused without hesitation. He then played a doctored audio recording, edited to make it sound as if Juno had betrayed him and didn't care about her son. Naively, Oliver believed every word. He confessed that their organization had sold intelligence to Russia, with Karpov acting as the middleman. To cover it up, Juno had sent Rebecca to assassinate him. He also revealed that the CIA had sent a Korean agent to get close to him, but when the man found solid proof, Oliver had no choice but to kill him. By morning, David had pieced everything together and immediately informed Rebecca. Meanwhile, Senator Dawson was already investigating the case and currently in South Korea, meaning if they handed him the evidence, the US would take down Juno. So David and Rebecca decided to return to Seoul. He told Eun-ju to leave for safety with her parents and their daughter, while he and Rebecca drove back into the city that same night. Their first target was Dawson's assistant. They found an opportunity to clone the data from his phone, which revealed the senator's schedule. Next, they went to a food district where Dawson was scheduled to appear. When he arrived, David called him, claiming he had a way to bring Juno down and requested a private meeting. After a moment's thought, Dawson agreed. David staged a brief distraction, slipped past security, and met the senator face to face. He told Dawson he could provide proof of Juno's crimes, but wanted full immunity for himself and his daughter. After careful thought, Dawson agreed. Later, David deliberately released Oliver nearby. "Your mother won't forgive you easily," he warned. "She'll find out what you told me sooner or later." Clearly, David was still working to drive a wedge between them. Meanwhile, Juno's subordinates reported that Dawson had gone off the radar for a full minute, and Oliver's signal had been traced near the same area. Shortly afterward, Oliver returned to headquarters. Though relieved he was alive, Juno couldn't shake her growing suspicions. The next morning, David and Rebecca began tailing them. They saw Juno preparing breakfast for Oliver, a picture of maternal warmth, but then she asked, "What did you tell David?" Oliver tried to lie, but Juno, ever the perceptive mother, saw through him instantly. Cornered, he had no choice but to tell the truth. After hearing her son's confession, Juno's expression shifted. She said it was fine, but her tone turned icy in an instant. David and Rebecca watched as Juno left Oliver's apartment. They knew it was time to push Oliver's doubts even further. They sneaked into the building's security room, erasing the footage of their entry. Rebecca hacked into the internal feed and successfully gained access to the live surveillance system. Using the live feed, they evaded the guards and slipped into Oliver's room. David planted listening devices while Rebecca kept watch. But Oliver returned much sooner than expected. They rushed their work and barely made it out just before he opened the door. Because David had intentionally left clues, Oliver soon discovered the bug hidden inside the wall. His face went pale. He immediately assumed his mother had planted it. Later, David met Dawson again. Suspecting there was a mole working for Juno inside his circle, he proposed setting a trap to expose them. Dawson forged a classified document claiming a secret witness was about to testify against Juno and the Caddis organization. As expected, the file was leaked to Juno almost immediately. Dawson witnessed the betrayal firsthand. Meanwhile, Juno took the bait, believing the witness was her own son, and ordered her men to watch Oliver's every move. Rebecca told David that this level of doubt wasn't enough to make Oliver turn completely against his mother. They needed to exploit his weakness, fear. "If we make him believe Juno wants him dead," she said, "he'll run straight to Dawson." That night, when security escorted Oliver home, they texted Juno their report, but to Oliver, it looked like proof that his mother was plotting against him. Panicking, Oliver grabbed a knife for protection, only to find his mother waiting inside, holding a gift. When he opened the box, it was a bow and arrow set. "You're flying back to England tonight. What? The organization and all of this, it's not for you." But Oliver refused. He'd endured everything for this organization. How could she say he didn't belong? He believed he was destined to inherit her empire, not be cast aside. Juno calmly told him she'd already spoken with his father and arranged for him to work under him instead. Enraged, Oliver grabbed his car keys and stormed out. Worried, Juno ordered her men to follow him. When Rebecca learned of it, she immediately informed David. The plan could begin. David knocked out one of Juno's guards and took off after Oliver, with Rebecca following close behind. Working together, they funneled Oliver onto a prearranged route. At the perfect moment, David triggered the remote device, cutting power to Oliver's car. As the vehicle stalled, David detonated a small charge nearby. Seeing the explosion, Oliver panicked, now utterly convinced his mother wanted him dead. He immediately called Dawson, agreeing to cooperate fully with the investigation. Dawson granted him immunity and promised 24/7 protection. Oliver got into the senator's car and drove away. Shortly afterward, Dawson called David, saying that even a fraction of Oliver's confession was enough to convict Juno and dismantle her organization. "Soon, we won't have to keep running. You and your daughter can finally live like a family." That night, they celebrated with a drink, but as the alcohol settled, Rebecca admitted she'd never had a real education. All she knew were the skills of killing, and in a strange way, she liked it. David tried to tell her that Juno had turned her into a weapon, that she still had a chance to start over. But Rebecca shook her head. She said she'd gone to Juno by choice, that everything she'd done was voluntary. Juno hadn't forced her. David fell silent, not knowing how to respond. At that moment, the surveillance monitor showed Juno's men approaching. There were too many to fight. They split up and agreed to regroup by the river. On her escape route, Gunn and his team intercepted Rebecca. By the time David arrived, she was gone. He chased them on a motorcycle, nearly dying in the process, but couldn't catch up. The next day, Rebecca was brought before Juno, but before the woman could gloat, Rebecca calmly told her that Oliver had turned himself into Dawson and was now a witness, meaning Juno's empire was about to fall. Juno's expression darkened. She rushed out to verify the news, then returned minutes later with her composure fully restored. Rebecca explained that she wanted Juno to feel what it was like to have her family torn apart. She admitted that she and David had destroyed Oliver's car, making him believe his mother was behind it. That's why he went to Dawson. Juno said nothing, tossing the handcuff keys onto the table. Rebecca smirked, unlocked herself, and said, "Maybe you should go save your crumbling empire. That doesn't matter anymore. What I need is you." Then Juno began using David's own tactic, sowing doubt and division. "Where's your home, Rebecca?" she asked. "With David and his new wife. Do you even have a place there? I'm the one who's always treated you like my own daughter." The words struck something deep within Rebecca. Her eyes flickered with emotion before turning cold again, yet in the end, she chose to leave with Juno. By then, the FBI had raided Caddis headquarters, forcing Juno to flee South Korea. Rebecca followed her into a convoy heading for Incheon Airport. Meanwhile, David turned to his father-in-law for help, asking him to find men, vehicles, and weapons. The old man agreed instantly, but on one condition: David would owe him a favor. Without hesitation, David accepted. Saving his daughter came first. With his father-in-law's powerful support, David obtained specialized gear and assembled an elite team, leading them toward the target. Soon after, the FBI stormed the Caddis offices, seizing everyone and everything inside. Meanwhile, Juno's convoy entered the ambush zone David had set up. He cut the power grid, shutting down every traffic light, plunging the intersections into chaos. Realizing something was wrong, Juno ordered her convoy to change routes. David smirked coldly and signaled Team 1 to begin. A truck roared forward, blocking their path. Forced to turn again, Juno's cars veered into a narrow construction road. Following David's orders, his men sealed the area. Juno immediately realized David was behind it and ordered her guards to break through. The two sides finally clashed head-on. Within seconds, Juno lost one vehicle, then another, pinned by a massive industrial truck. With no way out, she commanded her team to fight to the death. Gunn got out to scout an escape route, but David went after him. Just then, Rebecca struck from behind, ambushing Juno. Her betrayal was revealed. Everything before had been an act. Meanwhile, David and Gunn faced off for the third time. When David's gun jammed, they were forced into a brutal hand-to-hand fight. At first, David was on the defensive, but soon turned the tide, using a heavy chain to beat Gunn down, then pinning him to the ground. Even bleeding and broken, Gunn refused to quit until David drove the knife home, ending it for good. Moments later, David rushed back. Rebecca had subdued Juno, but when he raised his gun, she suddenly pleaded, "I don't want her to die. She's part of me." For his daughter's sake, David lowered his gun. He drove her away as Juno escaped by plane to a country with no extradition treaty. Though Caddis had fallen, her eyes still burned with ambition. She wasn't done yet. Later, David reunited with Rebecca, Eun-ju, and their little girl. It seemed like a new beginning, but fate had other plans. That evening, the family dined together at a restaurant. Eun-ju and Rebecca went to the restroom but never came back. Uneasy, David went to check and found his wife with a deep slash across her neck, bleeding out. Rebecca was gone. Trembling, David pressed on her wound and whispered, "Did Rebecca do this?" But Eun-ju couldn't speak. David's scream echoed through the restaurant, a cry of grief and rage. The story pauses here, tangled, haunting, and unfinished. The writers leave us drowning in unanswered questions. Eun-ju's death is the biggest twist yet. Rebecca is gone. Did she kill her stepmother, or was she framed? If she did it, maybe it was out of hatred, or maybe Juno poisoned her mind, convincing her that destroying her father's world was the only way to be free. But if she was framed, then Juno never left. She orchestrated the tragedy to turn father and daughter against each other while she watched from the shadows. After losing Eun-ju, David will stop at nothing to find his daughter. But when he does, will he seek vengeance, or try to save her once more? If there's a season 2, things will only get darker. The bond between father and daughter will shatter. Juno will pull the strings from the shadows, and everyone will have to choose revenge or survival. And that's the end of Butterfly 2025. Thanks for watching till the very end. See you in the next video.
Rebecca! Rebecca. Stay with me.